The 18 ships limped through space for 3 weeks before they reached Velen territory. They traveled slowly, their engines barely working, their crews exhausted and broken. Some died along the way, their bodies buried in space because the ships had no fuel to carry them home. Grand Admiral Keth sat alone in his quarters on the repaired flagship. The humans had fixed it just enough to make the journey. They had given him food, medicine, and their prisoners back. They had asked for nothing in return, except one thing: tell the truth about what happened. When the surviving ships finally reached the Velen capital world, the reception was not what Keth expected. There were no crowds cheering their return. There were no officers welcoming them home. Instead, there were soldiers pointing weapons at them as they landed. The Emperor wanted answers. Keth was brought to the throne room in chains. The Emperor of the Velen sat on his golden seat, surrounded by advisors and guards. He was ancient, over 1,000 years old, kept alive by technology that most species could not understand. He had ruled the Empire for 8 centuries. He had never lost a war. "You sent me 9,700 ships," the Emperor said. His voice was soft, but everyone in the room felt its power. "You promised me an easy victory. You told me the humans were primitives. Now you return with 18 broken vessels and tales of defeat." Keth knelt on the cold floor. He had known this moment was coming. He had prepared for it during the long journey home. "I did not fail you, my Emperor," Keth said carefully. "I was deceived. We were all deceived." The Emperor leaned forward. "Explain." Keth took a deep breath. "The humans knew we were coming. Not days or weeks before. They knew 60 years ago. They intercepted our census transmission and learned what we planned. And instead of building ships and weapons in the open where we could see them, they hid everything." He described the lunar railguns hidden beneath fake craters. He described the mines that looked like rocks. He described the fleet that had risen from the oceans like a nightmare. "They designed every weapon specifically to kill our ships," Keth continued. "They studied our technology for decades. They knew our shield frequencies, our hull weaknesses, our battle tactics. When we arrived, they were ready. We flew into a trap that had been set before most of our soldiers were born." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. The advisors around him whispered nervously. "You are saying the humans outthought us," the Emperor said finally. "You are saying they prepared for 60 years while we ignored them." "Yes, my Emperor." "You are saying they are not primitives." Keth raised his head and looked directly at the Emperor. "They let us think they were primitives. They pretended to be weak and divided. They watched us conquer other species and did nothing. They wanted us to underestimate them. Why would they do that? Because they wanted us to come. They wanted us to attack with everything we had, confident of easy victory. They wanted to destroy our fleet completely, so thoroughly that everyone in the galaxy would hear about it." The Emperor stood from his throne and walked down the steps toward Keth. His guards moved to stop him, but he waved them away. "What are you saying, Admiral?" Keth met the Emperor's eyes. "I am saying the humans were never prey. They were predators pretending to sleep. And now they are awake." The throne room fell completely silent. The Emperor turned away and walked to the massive window that overlooked the capital city. Millions of Velen lived down there, going about their daily lives, trusting their Emperor to protect them. "What message did they send?" the Emperor asked. Keth hesitated. "They said, 'Earth remembers everything.'" The Emperor did not move for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Smaller, older, clear, the room. Everyone except Admiral Keth. The advisors and guards left quickly, grateful to escape. When the doors closed, only the Emperor and the defeated Admiral remained. "In 800 years of rule, I have conquered 400 species," the Emperor said quietly. "Some fought bravely. Some surrendered quickly. But none of them prepared for 60 years. None of them built a trap of that size. None of them won. He turned to face Keth. These humans, what do they want? Keth thought about the question carefully. He remembered the young captain who had accepted his surrender. He remembered the way the humans fought with precision and fury. He remembered the message they had made sure would reach the galaxy. I think they want what we wanted from them, Keth said. They want to never be threatened again. They want the galaxy to know that attacking Earth is not conquest. It is suicide. The Emperor nodded slowly. Then we have created something we cannot control. By threatening them, we made them strong. By attacking them, we made them angry. And by losing to them, we showed the galaxy that the Velen Empire is not invincible. He walked back to his throne and sat down heavily. Other species will see what happened. They will realize that if humans can defeat us, perhaps they can too. We may have started our own destruction. Keth had nothing to say to that. It was probably true. Go, the Emperor said. Return to your quarters. You are not punished for this defeat. You are the only one who can teach us about our new enemy. Keth bowed and left the throne room far across the galaxy. On a blue planet orbiting a yellow sun, Admiral Taiho watched the news reports from other species. The story of the battle had spread faster than anyone expected. Every sentient species in the galaxy was talking about the humans who had destroyed the Velen fleet. Some were scared. Some were impressed. Some began to wonder if their own empires might fall to these strange creatures from Earth and on Earth itself. Humanity continued to build. More ships. More weapons. More defenses. The war with the Velen was not over. It had barely begun, but they had learned something important. They had learned that they could win. Taiho stood at the window of his office, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, 18 ships were telling the story of the day the Empire lost. Somewhere out there, species were learning to fear the word human. Earth remembers everything, he thought. And now the galaxy will remember us. The night sky looked different now. It was not a void filled with threats. It was a frontier waiting to be claimed. Humanity was done hiding. The hunters had become the hunted, and there was no going back. The Velen fleet ran. Grand Admiral Keth had given the order, and now 7,000 ships were trying to escape into deep space. But running from humans was not like running from other species. Humans did not stop chasing. Captain Yunbai led the pursuit force. 300 fighters and 50 fast cruisers, all designed for one purpose: to catch enemies who tried to flee. Our pilots were young and hungry. They had trained for years in simulators, dreaming of real combat. Now the dream was real, and they were not going to waste it. Enemy formation is breaking apart, her sensor officer reported. They are trying to scatter in different directions. Yunbai smiled behind her helmet. Let them scatter. We will hunt them one by one. The human ships split into hunting groups. Each group picked a target and pursued. The Velen vessels were fast, but human ships were faster. Human engineers had spent decades making sure of that, on the Hammer of Earth. General Kite watched the chase on his tactical display. His battleships were slower than the pursuit force, but they were following steadily, finishing off any enemy ships that had been damaged but not destroyed. The enemy flagship is trying to reach the edge of the system, his tactical officer said. They might make it to faster than light speed. Kite shook his head. Not today. Signal Commander Yuna. Tell her to fire the long-range batteries. On the moon, Yuna received the order. The lunar railguns had been recharging for hours. They were not at full power yet, but they had enough for a few shots. Target the enemy flagship, she ordered. Fire when ready. The gun spoke. Across millions of kilometers, 3 slugs of metal traveled toward the fleeing Velen command ship. At that distance, even light took seconds to travel. The slugs took longer, but they were guided by predictive computers that calculated exactly where the enemy would be. Grand Admiral Keth felt his ship shake. For a moment, he thought they had been hit by another human weapon. Then he saw the damage report. The first slug had missed. The second had grazed their port side, tearing away armor and weapons. The third had hit their engine section directly. "We are losing power," his engineer reported, his voice shaking. "Main engines are offline. We cannot reach faster than light speed." Keth stared at the screen showing the approaching human fleet. They would be here in minutes. His flagship was crippled. His fleet was dying. "All remaining ships, continue retreat," he ordered. "Leave us behind." Some ships obeyed. Others were too loyal to abandon their admiral. They turned back to defend the flagship. It was a brave but stupid choice. Captain Junbai saw the enemy ships forming a defensive circle around their crippled flagship. She adjusted her approach vector. "This is pursuit leader to all hunting groups. The big one is wounded. Move in for the kill." Human ships converged from every direction. The defending Velen vessels fought hard, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. One by one, they fell. Inside the Velen flagship, Keth watched his last defenders die. The human fighters moved through his ships like sharks through water. They did not hesitate. They did not show mercy. They simply killed everything in their path. A human cruiser positioned itself directly in front of his viewport. Its weapons charged, ready to fire. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human ship," his communications officer said. Keth nodded slowly. "Put it through." A human face appeared on screen. She was young, with dark hair and cold eyes. "Captain Yumbai." "Grand Admiral Keth," she said. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your ship is crippled. You have two choices. Surrender and live, or fight and die. Choose now." Keth looked at his bridge crew. They were all looking at him, waiting. Some were injured. Some were scared. All were exhausted. He thought about his empire. He thought about his emperor. He thought about 200 years of victories, all ended in one day by a species he had dismissed as primitive. "We surrender," he said. Yunbai nodded. "A wise choice. Prepare to be boarded." Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated. Velen ships that could not flee surrendered or were destroyed. There was no middle ground. The humans were not interested in negotiations or ceasefires. They wanted the enemy defeated completely. The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it was over, the Velen fleet had lost 9,682 ships. Only 18 had escaped into faster-than-light travel. Their crews traumatized. Their ships barely functional. General Kite stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Earth as the final reports came in. They had won. Against all odds, against an enemy that had conquered hundreds of worlds, humanity had won. But the cost was high. 700 human ships destroyed. 40,000 humans dead. Cities on Earth damaged from enemy fire that had gotten through. "Sir, the enemy admiral is aboard and secured," an officer reported. "What should we do with him?" Kite thought for a long moment. They could execute him. They could torture him for information. They could do many things. Instead, he said, treat him well. Give him food and medical care. Then send him home. The officer looked confused. "Send him home, sir?" Kite nodded. "Him and any other prisoners who want to leave. Repair 18 of their ships and let them go." "Why would we do that?" Kite looked out at the debris field that had once been the mightiest fleet in the galaxy. "Because we want them to tell the story. We want the Empire to know exactly what happened here. We want every species in the galaxy to hear about the day humanity stopped pretending." The officer saluted and left. Kite remained at the viewport, watching the stars. The war was not over. It was just beginning. The Empire would send more ships. They would try again and again until humanity was destroyed or the Empire itself fell. But today, right now, they had won, and the galaxy would never forget it. General Kite had lived underwater for 31 years. He had entered the Pacific Fleet Command as a young captain with black hair and strong legs. Now his hair was white and his knees ached when the pressure changed. But his mind was sharp, and his heart was ready. "All ships report ready for launch," his aide said. Ki-Te stood in the command center of the largest ship ever built by human hands. The Hammer of Earth, they called it. 2 kilometers long, hidden in an underwater cave system that had been expanded over decades. It held 10,000 crew members and enough weapons to fight a small war by itself. Around it, in underwater bases scattered across every ocean, 4,000 more ships waited. Some were battleships like the Hammer. Some were fast cruisers. Some were small fighters designed for one pilot and one purpose: to kill enemy ships and not stop until they were dead or destroyed. "Begin launch sequence," Kite ordered, all across Earth. The oceans began to boil. Ships rose from the water like metal gods awakening from sleep. In the Pacific, in the Atlantic, in the Indian Ocean, vessels of every size broke through the surface and climbed toward the sky. People on the shores watched in shock. Most had never known these ships existed. Their governments had kept the secret for 60 years. Now, the secret was out. Grand Admiral Keth had pulled his fleet back to a safe distance from the moon. His officers were still trying to count their losses. The number kept climbing. 2,000. 2,200. 2,500. "Sir, new contacts," his sensor officer shouted. "Coming from the planet's surface." Keth turned to look at the screen. His blood went cold. Thousands of ships were rising from Earth. They were smaller than Velen vessels, but there were so many of them. They climbed through the atmosphere in perfect formation, their hulls glowing from the heat of their passage. "That is not possible," Keth said, for what felt like the 100th time. "Our scouts saw nothing. They have no fleet." His sensor officer was pale. "They hid them underwater, sir. In the oceans. Our sensors cannot penetrate liquid water effectively. We never thought to look." Keth felt something he had not felt in 200 years of warfare. Fear. The human fleet formed up between Earth and the Velen Armada. They did not attack immediately. They simply waited, like wolves watching wounded prey. A transmission came from the human flagship. Kite's face appeared on Keth's screen. The human looked old and tired, but his eyes were hard. "I am General Kite of the Earth Defense Fleet," the human said. "You have attacked our world without warning and without mercy. We offered peace, and you answered with silence. So now we will answer with war." Keth tried to compose himself. "You cannot win this fight. Even with your hidden ships, we still outnumber you. Surrender now, and some of your people may survive." Kite smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You still do not understand, do you? We have been preparing for you for 60 years. Every weapon you see was designed specifically to kill Velen ships. Every pilot you face has trained since childhood for this day. We know your shield frequencies. We know your hull weaknesses. We know everything." The transmission ended. Keth stared at the blank screen. Around him, his officers waited for orders. The fleet had already lost a quarter of its strength. The remaining ships were damaged and scared, but they were still the Velen Empire. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They would not be stopped by one small planet of soft creatures. "All ships, attack formation," Keth ordered. "Today we show these humans what the Empire can do." The two fleets moved toward each other. Space became a war zone. Captain Yunbai flew at the head of Fighter Squadron 12. Her ship was called the Tiger, and it moved like its name. Fast, silent, deadly. Stay in formation, she told her pilots. Target the engine sections. Remember your training. The Velen ships were huge compared to her fighters. But size was not everything. Human engineers had spent decades studying Velen technology from intercepted transmissions and captured scout ships. They knew exactly where to hit. The first wave of fighters reached the enemy line. Yunbai's targeting computer locked onto a Velen cruiser. She fired. Her missiles were not normal missiles. They carried warheads designed to match the exact frequency of Velen shields. The shields flickered and failed. The missiles passed through and hit the hull. The cruiser broke apart. Target destroyed, Yunbai reported. Moving to next target. All around her, the same scene repeated. Human fighters darted through the Velen formation, firing weapons that should not have worked but did. Every shot was precise. Every kill was clean. The Velen ships fired back, but the human fighters were too fast. They moved in patterns that the Velen computers could not predict. They worked in teams, covering each other, never staying still. General Kite watched the battle from the Hammer of Earth. His battleships were engaging the larger Velen vessels now. The fighting was brutal. Both sides were taking losses, but the humans were taking fewer. Enemy flagship identified, his tactical officer reported. The big one in the center. That is their command ship. Kite studied the target. It was massive, easily 5 times the size of the Hammer. Its shields were the strongest in the enemy fleet. Signal all ships, Kite said. Focus fire on the flagship. If we kill their commander, the rest will break. Hundreds of human ships turned their weapons toward Keth's vessel. The space around it lit up with fire. On the Velen flagship, alarm screamed. Keth gripped his command chair as the ship shook from impact after impact. Shields at 40%. Someone shouted. We cannot take much more. Keth looked at the tactical display. His fleet was dying around him. For every human ship destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. The humans fought like demons. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They just kept attacking wave after wave until everything in front of them was dead. Sir, we must retreat, his second officer begged. We cannot win this battle. Keth wanted to argue. He wanted to find some way to turn this around. But the numbers did not lie. His fleet was broken. Signal all ships, he said, the words tasting like poison. Full retreat, now. The Velen fleet began to run, but the humans did not let them go. Captain Junbai saw the enemy ships turning to flee. She pushed her engines to maximum. All fighters, pursuit formation. Do not let them escape. Today, we teach the galaxy that Earth is not prey. The hunt had begun. The Velen fleet crossed the orbit of Mars without slowing down. Grand Admiral Keth watched the red planet pass by on his view screen. His scouts had found human bases there, small and poorly defended. He would send ships to capture them after Earth fell. 2 hours to Earth orbit, his navigation officer announced. Keth stood and walked to the front of his bridge. Through the massive window, he could see Earth growing larger. Blue and green and white. A beautiful world. Rich in water, metals, and life. The Empire would use it well. Sir, we are detecting some unusual energy readings, his sensor officer said. Coming from the dark side of the human moon. Keth frowned. What kind of energy? Unknown. It could be a power plant of some kind. Should I send scouts to investigate? Keth considered it for a moment. Then he shook his head. Whatever the humans had on their moon could not change anything. His fleet was too large. His weapons were too strong. Ignore it. We stay on course. Deep beneath the lunar surface, Commander Yuna stood in a control room carved from rock. Around her, 50 officers monitored systems that had been tested thousands of times but never used in actual combat. Project Blackout. Humanity's first surprise. The enemy fleet is in range, one of her officers reported. Yuna looked at the tactical display. 9,700 dots, moving toward Earth like a swarm of insects. Her hands were no longer shaking. Strange, she thought. She had been scared for years. Now that the moment had arrived, she felt only calm. Primary batteries are charged and ready, another officer said. Yuna touched the communication panel. Admiral Taeho, this is Lunar Command. We have firing solutions on the lid elements. Awaiting your order. Taeho's voice came through clear and steady. Wait until they pass the marker. Let them commit. On the screens, the Velen fleet moved closer. They were arranging themselves into attack formation now. The larger battleships moved to the front. Troop carriers fell back to the protected center. It was the same formation they had used to conquer hundreds of worlds. The first ships crossed an invisible line in space. They are past the marker. Yuna reported. Then show them what the moon can do, Taeho said. Yuna pressed the firing command. The surface of the moon erupted. What had looked like craters and rocks split open. Massive railguns, each one a kilometer long, rose from their hiding places. They had been built over 40 years, piece by piece, disguised as mining equipment. The first shots traveled at 1% of light speed. At that velocity, even a small metal slug carried the energy of a nuclear bomb. Grand Admiral Keth saw the flash from the moon. For a moment, he did not understand what he was seeing. Then his flagship shook as something passed nearby. What was that? He demanded before anyone could answer. The front of his fleet began to die. The first battleship simply vanished. One moment it was there. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of gas and debris. Then another ship died. Then another. Then 10 more. We are under attack. His tactical officer screamed. Railgun fire from the lunar surface. Keth stared at the screen. It was impossible. The humans did not have railguns. They did not have the technology. His intelligence reports had been clear. Return fire. He ordered. His ships began shooting at the moon, but the railguns were deep underground now, protected by hundreds of meters of rock. The Velen weapons scorched the lunar surface without reaching the guns beneath. Another volley came. This time, 50 ships died at once. How many guns do they have? Keth demanded. No one answered. The sensor data was confused. There were hundreds of energy signatures now, scattered all across the moon's surface. On Earth, Admiral Taeho watched the first phase of the battle with grim satisfaction. The lunar railguns were performing exactly as designed. Each shot was a kill. The enemy formation was breaking apart as ships tried to scatter. Activate the mines, he ordered. In the space between the moon and Earth. Millions of small objects had been floating for decades. They looked like space rocks. They were actually the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created. The mines detected the Velen ships trying to escape the railgun fire. They activated their tiny engines and began to move. Grand Admiral Keth saw the warning too late. Thousands of human mines were converging on his fleet from every direction. His ships shot at them, but there were too many. For every mine that exploded harmlessly, 10 more got through. The explosions lit up space like fireworks. Ships that had survived the railguns now broke apart under the mine assault. Escape pods launched by the hundreds, but the mines did not stop for escape pods. This is impossible, Keth whispered. This is impossible. In the first 20 minutes of the battle, the Velen Empire lost 2,000 ships. 2,000 vessels that had conquered worlds destroyed civilizations, and terrified the galaxy. Gone. The remaining ships pulled back, trying to regroup outside the range of the lunar guns. But they were no longer a fleet. They were a panicked crowd. "Sir, we are receiving communications from the other admirals," Keth's officer said. "They are requesting orders." Keth tried to think. He had never faced anything like this. In his entire career, he had never lost more than 100 ships in a single battle. Now he had lost 2,000 in minutes. "Pull back to safe distance," he ordered. "We need to reassess." As the fleet retreated, a new message came from Earth. This time, it was not a request for peace. It was a single image, a human hand making a gesture that Dave's translator could not interpret. On Earth, Admiral Tejo allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. The enemy was hurt and confused, but it was not over. Not even close. "The lunar guns will need 4 hours to recharge for full power," Una reported. "The minefield is 60% depleted." Tejo nodded. They had used their surprises. Now came the real fight. "Signal General Kite," he said. "Tell him it is time for the fleet to rise." In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, in underwater bases hidden beneath volcanic ridges, thousands of ships began to wake from their long sleep. The second phase of humanity's defense was about to begin, and the Velen Empire was about to learn that the moon was only the beginning. The stars had never looked so crowded. From the observation deck of the Velen flagship, Grand Admiral Keth watched his fleet stretch across the void like a metal sea. 9,700 warships. Each one was bigger than any building humans had ever made. Each one carried enough firepower to turn a city into dust in seconds. Keth smiled. This would be easy. The Velen Empire had conquered 412 species across the galaxy. Some had fought. Some had surrendered. All had fallen. Humanity would be no different. They were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. Their ships were small. Their weapons were old. Their planet was rich with resources that the Empire needed. "We will arrive at the human homeworld in 6 hours," his second officer reported. Keth nodded slowly. He had studied the humans for months. They were strange creatures. Soft bodies. Short lives. They spent most of their existence fighting each other over small pieces of land and different ideas about invisible gods. They were divided into hundreds of nations that could barely agree on anything. Easy prey. On Earth, Admiral Tejo stood in the deep underground command center. The walls were thick enough to survive nuclear bombs. Screens covered every surface, showing feeds from thousands of satellites and sensors scattered across the solar system. He was an old man now. 63 years of service to humanity. He had trained for this moment his entire life, as had his father and his father before him. "Sir, we have confirmation," Lieutenant Una said. Her voice was calm, but Tejo could see her hands shaking slightly. 9,700 warships. They will reach Earth orbit in 6 hours. Tejo took a deep breath. Around him, 200 officers worked at their stations. Some were young, barely out of training. Others were veterans who had waited decades for this day. "Send the signal?" Tejo said quietly. Una hesitated for just a moment, then pressed the button that would change everything. Across the world, in every country, in every military base, the same message appeared on screens. 2 words that humanity had hoped would never come, but had always prepared for. Protocol Dawn. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, massive doors that had been sealed for 50 years began to open. In the cold darkness of the moon's far side, machines that had been sleeping since humanity's grandparents were children started to wake up. On Mars, in bases that the public had never known existed, soldiers who had trained their whole lives finally learned why. Humanity was not surprised. Humanity had been waiting. It had started 60 years ago when the first alien signal was detected. It was not a friendly greeting. It was a census transmission from the Velen Empire, cataloging Earth as a future conquest target. The message was not meant to be intercepted, but human scientists had caught it anyway. The world's governments had made a choice that day. They did not panic. They did not tell their people. Instead, they began to prepare in secret. Every nation contributed. Old enemies worked together. Money that was supposed to go to roads and hospitals went to hidden shipyards instead. The brightest minds on Earth designed weapons that could hurt ships they had never seen. They built defenses in places no one would think to look. For 60 years, humanity pretended to be weak. They let their visible military stay small. They made their public space program look like a joke. When Velen scouts flew past, they saw exactly what they expected to see. A primitive species with primitive technology. They did not see the guns hidden in asteroids. They did not see the ships sleeping on the ocean floor. They did not see the millions of soldiers trained for a war that might never come. Grand Admiral Keth received the latest scan of Earth as his fleet moved closer. He saw small satellites. He saw a few old space stations. He saw exactly what his intelligence had promised. The humans are attempting to communicate, his communications officer said. Keth waved his hand. Let me hear it. The human message played on the bridge. It was the usual thing. We come in peace. Let us negotiate. We mean you no harm. Pathetic begging from a species that knew it was about to die. Do not respond, Keth ordered. They will understand soon enough. He settled back in his command chair. In 4 hours, his ships would enter orbit. In 5 hours, they would begin the bombardment. In 6 hours, Earth would surrender or burn. By tomorrow, humanity would be another entry in the Empire's long list of conquered species. Back on Earth, Tejo listened to the silence from the Velen fleet. He had not expected them to respond. The reports said they never did. All stations report ready, Una said. Lunar batteries are charged. Orbital mines are armed. The hidden fleet is rising to launch positions. Tejo looked at the screen showing the approaching enemy. So many ships. Even with everything humanity had built, this would not be easy. Many would die today. Perhaps everyone would die, but they would not die on their knees. Signal all commands, Tejo said. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity really is. Today, we stop pretending. Officers across the planet straightened in their chairs. Pilots climbed into cockpits. Gunners took their positions at weapons that had never been fired in real combat. 60 years of fear. 60 years of hiding. 60 years of watching the sky and wondering when the monsters would come. The monsters were here now, and humanity was ready. In the cold darkness of space, the Velen fleet moved closer. 9,700 warships, carrying 2 million soldiers, armed with weapons that had destroyed civilizations. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Admiral Tejo sat down slowly. His bones ached. His heart was beating too fast. But his mind was clear. He thought about his daughter. He thought about his grandchildren. He thought about every human who would live or die based on what happened in the next few hours. Let them come, he whispered. Let them all come. The countdown had begun.